Hello, everybody. Welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. This episode, we are talking about Guillermo del Toro's neo-noir Nightmare Alley.
But before we jump into that, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive Movie Reviews, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and join us on the film journey. And also keep in mind that this is a spoiler review. So you've been warned, we're going to go into a lot of details about Nightmare Alley. Tell us about it, James.
Okay, so yes, Nightmare Alley is a new film from Guillermo del Toro's first film of his since he won Best Picture and Best Director for The Shape of Water 4 years ago. This is not, he says, a remake of the 1947 film. It is another adaptation of the William Lindsay Gresham book from the early 40s. Although obviously they are very similar in many, many, many ways. This is a star-studded affair with Bradley Cooper playing Stanton Carlyle, who is a huckster drifter in 1941 US. It's left pretty vague, I think, where they are exactly, isn't it? I don't think the cities are given any name. And essentially, Stanton Carlyle, the first thing we see him do is bury a dead body under the floorboards of an abandoned house, set fire to it, and wander off. Takes the bus to Nowheresville, where he gets off, wanders into a carnival, gets a job, and before we know it, he's working the attractions alongside Xena the Seer, played by Toni Collette. And there's an assortment of sort of strange persons, freaks, geeks, and what have you along the way. And this is the story of his rise and fall. He becomes a renowned mentalist, and then things kind of don't go quite so well for him.
I think this is the natural kind of film that Guillermo del Toro is drawn to. You know, he's really made a reputation for himself as a bit of a master of the macabre, of visual stunning set designs and the such. And that carnival atmosphere just lends itself. The macabre nature, the freaks, the geeks, the twisted natures on humanity that one finds before things were regulated as they are today. Yeah. I really reminded watching this is how far we've evolved as humanity. Because although these kind of things, of course, still happen in the world today, I think there's a greater awareness that we don't want to live in the kind of world that Bradley Cooper is living in this film. But by and large, I found this movie to be, I don't think Guillermo del Toro really lived up to his reputation in this movie. I would have expected even more macabre, more delving into some of the twisted natures in humanity. This movie certainly touches on a number of elements, and there are a few disturbing scenes, but I actually thought it was pretty light. I was going in ready for one experience, and I came out with, I was underwhelmed, to be honest. That's my initial perception.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I remember it's kind of touted as the first movie that he's done that doesn't really dip into the supernatural in any way. I mean, if you're not familiar with his works, he comes from Mexican cinema, where he was very much a horror filmmaker with films like Kronos and Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth. It was like his big sort of international breakout. And then in Hollywood, he's done a variety of sort of supernatural and fantasy and sci-fi and horror movies, mimic Hellboy and Hellboy 2, Pacific Rim, Crimson Peak, and then Shape of Water.
He did the TV show The Strain as well. He wrote the book.
That's right.
Did the TV show, and I really enjoyed that TV show. I thought it was a take on the vampire mythos that I thought was original, and I really enjoyed it.
I think that's the only thing of his I haven't seen. I've seen all of his movies, but I'm always a bit behind on TV, and so I haven't seen The Strain. But for me, I mean, this was him sort of saying that I want to do a proper, like, old school 40s film noir. Yeah. And it's very much that. And if he's going to remake one, this feels like, as you said, the perfect one for him. It has got that kind of carnival-esque sort of sideshow, freak show kind of thing element to it. That's where all these characters are sort of making a fast buck, and through sleight of hand and misdirection, And that feels very much in his wheelhouse. He exists kind of on the peripheries of normal everyday life, if you like, and he does gravitate towards the macabre, like you said, towards the grotesque, and this has an element of sort of P.T. Barnum's circus, films like Todd Browning's Freaks, which is the classic early Hollywood story of sort of the freak show, humanizing the freaks of the freak show, if you like, and even films like sort of The Elephant Man and things like that. There's an element of all of that, and I think what he does best is create a sort of visual spectacle. He is very much a sort of showman as well. His films always look incredibly sort of rich. The production design is incredible. Like I said, he's got a star-studded cast. You've got Bradley Cooper, but you've got Cate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, Toni Collette, Ron Perlman, Clifton Collins Jr., Richard Jenkins. It goes on and on and on and on. He's become one of those directors that it seems everybody wants to work with. And I agree with you to a degree. I agree that for me, although a lot of his films are sort of wear their hearts on their sleeve, they're not subtle in their sort of romantic imaginings, if you like. A film like Pan's Labyrinth or a film like Shape of Water is so kind of big-hearted. And he's always talking about seeing the beauty in the monsters. Humanizing the grotesque and embracing sort of Frankenstein's monster or whomever. I do find his films just a little bit emotionally simplistic. I think they're dazzling to look at often. Yeah. He's a great sort of visual artiste. He grew up as a sketching and drawing before he started sort of writing. He's very visually minded filmmaker, and he obviously has a great love of classic Hollywood cinema. It's made with a great deal of affection and reverence and knowledge and attention to detail. He understands exactly what he is doing to a really impressive degree. I just feel that there is a slight sort of emotional disconnect. I feel that it's almost like the characters are so sort of larger than life that they're difficult to really invest in as an audience member. You're like, they never quite feel human enough. And I know there are plenty of people who disagree. I know for a lot of people, his films are succeed at that, and that's one of the great strengths of his work. But for me, they've always just felt a little emotionally simplistic.
I concur with you. Like, I was one of these people that I enjoyed Shape of Water, but when it won Best Picture, I went, really? I find the romance element that other people seem to really resonate with was not resonating with me. I just I'm a little old school. You can empathize with the monster. You can love the monster, but you can't love the monster, And so it didn't work for me on a few levels, although it's visually stunning. This movie is visually stunning. There is set design, James, I'm old enough at 55 that there was some set pieces and some marketing that I remember, even just seeing a Ford sign, the way it was put on the side of a barn at one point or the side of a building. I remember that growing up in the early 70s. Brought me back to my childhood. I love this. Obviously, there's a very authentic, they really did their research and their history to capture an era. And I was transported back. There's something about the whole carnival aspect too. I mean, whether it's HBO's Carnival or Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Right.
There's things that happen in carnivals that are borderline supernatural, borderline touching that little world between the mythos and the real. There's so many things you can do in that environment. And I think that's why, maybe I was looking for a little more of a supernatural element. I'm trying to figure out what it was in this movie that didn't quite reach the expectation I'd hoped for, even though there were aspects of this film that I certainly enjoyed.
I mean, I I do kind of agree with you. What I will say though is I've seen the film twice now, and certainly the first time I watched it, I came away agreeing basically word for word with what you're saying.
Okay.
Having seen it a second time, and so now that those expectations are grounded, I know what it is and I know what it isn't. I was able to go back and appreciate it for what it was more, and I think I got more out of it the second time. I also went back and watched the old 1947 version because there are elements to the story that I didn't really remember being being at the forefront of the old version. And I wanted, particularly the stuff about the geek.
Okay.
I was like, I can't really remember that. And I had read that it ends pretty much the same way. And I was like, I couldn't remember. So I went back, and it's a little bit more subtle in the older version. You don't really see the geek. I mean, Del Toro puts him like up front in those right at the beginning. He walks into the geek show, and you look at the geek and you see the geek ripping the head off a chicken. Whereas in the old film, the Tyrone Power film, he's more talked about and heard, and you don't really sort of see him until Tyrone Power's character almost like becomes him at the end, to sort of spoil it. And there's kind of I like the fact that Del Toro leans into the inevitability of all of that. It's far more subtle. You saw in the old film when Tyrone Power is there watching and they're introducing the geek and the whole spiel that the Barker and the sideshow is giving about the geek. During that whole speech, the camera is right on Tyrone Power, rather than on the geek. And so it's talking about, is he more animal or man? And the camera's just on Tyrone Power, who's just standing there watching, listening. And Del Toro, acknowledges all of that. But at the same time, there's this sort of sense of inevitability. There's a kind of circular sort of theme to the narrative where everything is going to come full circle.
Right.
And right from the offset, you know that Bradley Cooper will become the geek kind of thing. He's just the kind of guy that they tell him through the whole movie that the geek is.
Right.
He's a guy that just wanders in looking for a job at some temporary work. He can only do it for a bit.
Fallen on hard times. Things haven't worked out for them. They're desperate.
From the beginning, it's like tick, 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 ticking all these boxes. And the minute, it's quite late on the film, the minute he takes that first drink,
yes,
you're just like, okay. And it's interesting because when he goes through the psychoanalysis with Cate Blanchett's psychologist, she keeps playing on the fact that he uses the word never. I never touch stuff, never. And she's like, we're going to work on that. And that's Del Toro. That's the movie telling him, we're going to work on this. Never. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to, because already the inevitability of what's going to happen, that his fate is already kind of set in stone right from the offset.
It's sealed from the beginning. It's fate. It's deterministic. This is your destiny. And he actually says it at the end. Do you want this temporary job? Man, he's crying and laughing at the same time. I was born for this.
I was born for it.
It's a wonderful ending that I think Del Toro lands better than the earlier film.
I'm tipping my hand a little bit. I gave this an extra half star because of the ending. I was through the whole movie, I had a star rating of what I'm going to give this. And I thought the ending was so good, I knocked it up another half because I thought, okay, that landed pretty well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was watching it, and me and my wife watched it, and we came away kind of going, yeah, it's good. It's good. It's a bit long, but it's good. And that final scene where he is offered the job to be the geek, and you realize that it's crushing on him. But he's just like, but of course, I've come full circle. That stayed with me for days and even weeks, and just sort of nurtured my feelings about the rest of the film. So I was really keen before we sat down and talked about it to go back and watch it again and see how it sat that second time, because it earns that ending so well.
It does. It was filmed really well. Bradley Cooper pulled it off incredibly. So that mixture of laughter and crying as his fate is determined, because it's just a temporary job. It's just
Oh
temporary.
yeah, just till we find a real geek.
Until we find the real geek, it's just going to be here. Have a drink. Here, have a drink, and let's talk about
and
it.
He knows this. He's been told this.
Yeah,
He
knows how this plays out. He's
been told this speech, and he's been taught this speech, and this and how this trick works. This is something interesting. Is a couple of weeks ago, I saw Bradley Cooper being interviewed on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and they showed a clip, and they showed that scene.
Really?
And I was
clip.
And I was like, what? This is the last scene of the movie. What's going on? But I can understand why they want to show off this scene, because it's a great bit of acting from Bradley Cooper. But at the same time, I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And I think it only illustrates how, in a way, it is inevitable. You know, the ending almost is a foregone conclusion to such a degree that we're going to show you the ending as part of our marketing to get you to come and watch the movie. You know,
I think
it was a very bizarre choice.
Well, I think this is why this movie works for me on a certain level, and I enjoyed it, but it's not one that I just give full awards and scores to, because I've said before, I'm a sucker for redemption movies, and this is by definition the anti-redemption film. This is
no redemption.
There is no redemption. It's funny, I kept thinking of the movie Damnation Alley with Jan Michael Vincent, you know, where they
I'm not sure I've seen that.
It's an old 70s, you don't have to go back and watch it, but it was one of those 70s post-apocalyptic movies where they have this arc thing, and it's and because of the nature of this movie, Damnation Alley actually almost makes a better title. It's probably thinking, oh, that's, and of course it's based on the book, so they can't really change the name. But the whole week I kept confusing it with, oh, I gotta make sure I watch Damnation Alley this week. I gotta watch that new Bradley Cooper movie. What's that, Damnation Alley? And but it's because the theme of this is so linked in my mind to damnation. Bradley Cooper's Stan is damned from the very first scene, where what we find out is his dad, he's just killed and burying. This is a guy with more baggage, and yet had more opportunity to make right decisions. There had to have been 20 different off ramps to get off of the destiny that he had before him. You know, Rooney Mara, his relationship with her, it was a beautiful relationship. All he had to do was stick with her, take advice from her, do what she suggested, and life would have been fine. He found it impossible to make good decisions, and sometimes I find that frustrating to watch.
Sure. I mean, that's what I mean. There's the great irony that, you know, he makes his money and his name as a mentalist, you know, someone who almost predicts people's future, whereas his is the only future that has been predicted already. Right. You know, the only one's fate in the cards is his, and we're all in on it, and we all know it right from the off. It's like, yeah, you suck and you're screwed. Yeah. And it, you know, and it is painted from that first moment where you see him like burying that body. You know, he has already sort of made his bed, if you like. Yeah. He's already dug his own grave. You know, he's burying himself in that first scene.
Absolutely. One of the things that I really did enjoy about the film, though, James, is I like any movie that lets us peek behind the curtain of the world of con men and grifters. You know, whether it's like House of Games, David Mamet's House of Games, or The Sting, something like that. When con men are being con men, I love David Stratham and Toni Collette. You know, when they're kind of, you're seeing how things operate behind the scenes, how they're doing the cold readings, how they're reading people's mail. And that moment where Bradley Cooper says to Toni Collette, when she kind of tells somebody, hey, listen, just backstage, I had to tell her the truth. Why'd you tell her the truth? Give her a little hope. And David Stratham says, no, we don't do a spook show. We don't, when it comes to death, that is going to open up a can of worms you don't want to deal with. And so, you know, immediately this movie is going to be about this can of worms.
That's what he's going to do.
He can't resist opening. Like, he's been warned. This is a road you do not want to go down, because this is going to open up things and people you don't want to see. And he can't take that warning. And of course, he goes down that road and all kinds of hell breaks loose.
Right. I mean, I think the one thing what I took most from the movie is that, you know, us along with Del Toro, you know, no, he kind of assumes that we know where this is going, and so let's just enjoy the journey. And so it's all about just the richness of the period, the ghoulishness of the sideshows, you know, all the freakish one-eyed baby in the jar that killed his mother. And
Enoch, the one-eyed
eunuch, the one who killed his mother on the way out, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, all of those things, that's pure Del Toro for me. Yeah. You know, and I think the cast really kind of sort of embraced that and ran with it. You know, Cate Blanchett in particular. I mean, she's an actress born out of her own time. I mean, if anybody was like should have been a star in like the 30s and 40s, it's kind of Cate Blanchett. She absolutely looks the part. She's absolutely fantastic. I mean, she's great in the role as well.
She is. She's great. She's great in any role, but
she's always great. Yeah. You know, and I love that so much of the film is about him and his relationship with different women and how he's trying to sort of manipulate these women, but invariably they all end up sort of screwing him over completely. I love the production design. I love how if you look at the production design, if you look at the set design, there are these recurring motifs in the design itself. There are circles everywhere, and I think that's not a coincidence at all. You know, right from the very beginning, when he walks into the circus, the geek hole is a circle, the funhouse tunnel is a circle, the Ferris wheel is a circle. You know, the windows.
Remember, he goes through the tunnel, and there's that big eye, and then there's exactly the eye and the Enoch.
Yeah, everywhere you look, it's circles, basically sort of saying, you know, this is going to come back around. And then when he leaves there and goes into the city, you see just like corridors everywhere. You see like literal nightmare alleys. Every building is just like long corridors, the hotels and the office buildings, and everywhere he goes, it's just these long corridors. And you're like, that can't be by accident. You know, that has to be sort of knowing how detail oriented and how visually oriented Guillermo del Toro is. You're like, oh, all of this is absolutely, you know, designed to foreshadow what is happening, what is going to happen.
I think that's one of the things I won't say didn't work for me, but I enjoyed the environment of the carnival. Once they kind of moved to Buffalo and to New York into high society, it became less interesting for me. I loved that peek into that world where these carnies, and I would have loved to hear more of their stories, and the set design, just the little small details that Del Toro uses, you know, just dropping a dime in when he is going to pay for the bathtub, like just that it costs a dime, you know, you get to use the bathtub for a dime, and we'll give you, you know, when William Dafoe is trying to lure him in to help out, he goes, I'll promise you a hot meal, you know, like in 1930s, 40s, you know, who would be lured by a hot meal? But then in the next scene, you see Bradley Cooper, he's not just having some slop. He's actually having like sausage and eggs and slurping up the yolk with the bread. And even Tammy, when we're watching it, going, man, he is sure enjoying that meal. And he was there was a conveying of a time that a lot of us living in some of the opulence we live in now can't really appreciate. And so we're forced as an audience to consider a different time where a hot meal was like, damn, I'll take that job.
That's hard currency.
That's hard currency. And then to see the love he was having for that hot meal. So yeah, there was things visually and detail wise in this film that Del Toro really rises to what we come to expect in a film that he has created. And by and large, I enjoyed this film, but again, it's just a few things where I found a little, you know, it'd be interesting if I went back and watched it a second time with my expectations removed, whether I would appreciate it more as you did.
Yeah, I mean, that really did help for me. I mean, because it is long and the structure is strange, you know, compared with a lot of traditional movies. It's not like a 3-act structure. It's more like a 2-act structure.
Yes.
You know, it's like, you know, it's the first half and the second half. And yes, we've said that it's a circle as well. But so if you don't know where it's going, you know, again, even though we've sort of talked about how inevitable it all is, The pace can feel strange, slightly unusual. But I think that there just genuinely is an enjoyment and appreciation to be had about sort of taking the time to look again at the richness of the design of it all. I mean, I think it's a film that what stuck with me was just how good it looked and how detailed it looked. I mean, I know you're talking about how you like the first half, and I certainly like that. And there's a lot of visual nods in sort of the marquees and the banners advertising the different things, and the spider woman. Yes. I can't remember exactly what it's a reference to, but that's a very, I remember seeing, I've seen old black and white photos comparisons of, that's a very specific old timey reference that Del Toro is drawn from there. But I actually really liked the kind of Art Deco interiors of the second half, particularly like Cate Blanchett's office. Well, all of those like sliding doors revealing the recording device and the safe and all of that.
Yeah, no, you're good. That's well said, James. Sorry, I kind of killed it right there. I was just trying to think of the next. We'll edit that out. I was trying to think where I was going to go with my next thought there. I thought, James is right. Yeah, that was kind of good.
I mean, one thing that's interesting, and I find this with a lot of Del Toro's work, and I don't mean, it sounds like a criticism, but I don't really mean it as a criticism, is that as rich visually as they are and as detailed as they are, I think that they're slightly shallow in their themes and what have you. You know, he's a great lover of storytelling and of cinema and of imagery, but I don't think that it really sort of speaks to anything other than what it looks like, if that makes sense. You know, so many films that you can talk about and you're like, oh well, it's saying this, but what it's really about is something else. I don't think that that's necessarily true very often, certainly not with this film of Del Toro. I think it's about what it's about, and I think perhaps that's why you're left feeling slightly undernourished, perhaps, that there's so much being given to you, but it's all kind of telling you the same thing. Yeah, you know, it's all like on the same stuff. It's all just like, yes, these are the real monsters, not the people that look like monsters. You know, everybody will get their comeuppance in the end, and good will triumph, but perhaps not in the ways that you feel it will. And he revels in that mise en scène, you know, in the aesthetic, in the surface, in the costumes, in the production design, in the characters. But I think if you try to scratch under the surface to look for a deeper meaning to it, I'm not sure you'll find a lot there. No. And that's fine. But I think that that's a kind of lingering, it's a lingering, just shortcoming, a lingering kind of shortcoming in some of his work.
It's often an itch that never gets quite scratched. It's the way I felt in Shape of Water. I enjoyed it, but it left me kind of. Having said that, I enjoyed this movie more than I enjoyed Shape of Water, and Shape of Water won Best Picture. I thought this movie, it's a good, solid movie, but I think I agree with everything you just said. It would be interesting if Del Toro was able to take all that production value and visual stunning canvas that he creates and is able to bring a layered and structured story that communicates some deeper truths. And it's not that things aren't communicated in this about human nature. I mean, there's human nature is left.
It's writ large.
Yeah, this is it's in your face, and I think that's actually what you're talking about, because there's no subtlety under that.
He's like the ultimate carny, if you like, you know, with $100 million budget, you know, so he's got the greatest sideshow at the carnival, and he's like, look at all these things, and they're crazy, but they have hearts too, you know, and they are real people. But that's it.
And the characters that you are actually hinted that they have that depth and structure, they actually have minimal screen time. The Toni Collettes and the David Strathams, they're actually very nuanced characters who have been through this. They have a lot to give. They've seen a lot. You can tell that they're not given to the tossing and turning of the things that Bradley Cooper is susceptible to. But the depth that they could bring is never brought to the forefront because they're gone in the first 30 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, they are sort of the other attractions, if you like.
Yeah.
We're following, we're following one man's journey, descent into hell, if you like. He may have stepped out of a literal burning building at the beginning, but no, he's never really left that building, and he will be stuck there, stuck there forever. And this is just going to be a fun and colorful and elaborately designed helter skelter, going all the way down, or even a what's the thing that goes up and then goes down? One of them.
Yeah, one of those things.
Yeah,
an elevator.
Fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Come for the review and fill in your own theories.
It got me thinking. One last thought before we go to scoring, James, is when you mentioned you were shocked that on Stephen Colbert, Bradley Cooper showed the end scene, and got me thinking with some of what we've discussed in this review. If Del Toro doesn't actually see this almost the same way we would see Shakespeare, when we've reviewed Shakespeare, we've talked about Shakespeare in the past, that it's good to know the story in advance so you can see how it plays out. You already know the ending when you go in to see a Shakespeare play. You're not going there to be amazed at oh gosh, I didn't see that coming. We saw this coming all the way through the film. What sets this film apart is not the unfolding of the narrative, but maybe it is the unfolding of the narrative, but how they actually get to that destination that we all know we're heading to.
It's the journey, not the destination. At the end of the day, I mean, this is why I never really understand people who, and I know people like this, who won't watch movies again. They're like, oh, well, I've seen that, I know what happens. I'm like, so enjoy the journey, enjoy the storytelling. There's so much more to a movie than knowing the reveal at the end or whatever it might be.
That's why we love
and
films.
I think great. You'd never say that about a song. You never say, oh, I've heard that song, why am I listening to it again? I've heard it. You listen to it again and again and again if you like it, to get to know it, and so you know every word and every beat, and you can sing it to yourself when the song isn't even playing. I know that films are longer than songs, but that's the only difference. Films I like to get to know them back to front and appreciate every little detail. And I swear to you, every time you watch it, it's a different experience, because you're seeing more, you're concentrating on different things. You're not going, like, shut up. What they say, because you know what's coming. But also you are different every time that you watch a movie, and so you are coming to it in a different frame of mind, in a different mood. You're less tired, or you're more tired, or you're sober or drunk or whatever. Everything about you is different every time you go and see it. And so you're going to get a different experience from it. And that's why yes, I was surprised that they sort of showed the final scene, but they didn't announce on Colbert, this is the final scene. This is so seeing it in isolation, you're just like, oh wow, that's a great film from a weird looking movie. I didn't realize Bradley Cooper had that straggly beard, and you're like, okay. And so it's a ballsy move for sure, but I don't think it necessarily detracts from your enjoyment of the film. And as we have both agreed, it's that scene that really kind of hooks into your mind and festers and lingers long after the credits have rolled.
I made sure I didn't interrupt you at all, especially during the first part of that little soliloquy you just did, because I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that as a promotional piece or a short clip on why we should rewatch movies when we do like another playlist. I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was great. We're gonna reuse that, I think. So James, what are we going to give as a final score for, I want to say Damnation Alley, Nightmare Alley.
For Nightmare Alley. Well, I think we have to use sort of one-eyed eunuchs. No, not eunuchs, Enochs. A one-eyed eunuch, he's had a hell of a day.
One could argue that a eunuch by nature doesn't have the one eye anymore.
Well, quite. Okay, so I mean, do you want to go first?
I've pretty much tipped my hand. I'm happy to go first. I gave this movie originally, like I said, I gave it an extra half star. While I was watching it, I kept thinking, this is a 3-star movie. I'm enjoying it. I recommend it to other people, but it's leaving me a little bit underwhelmed. Having said that, when I saw the ending and how perfect the ending was, I added a half star. So I'm giving it 3.5 single-eyed Enoch mutant babies for my score.
But this is great because I'm on exactly the same page. I came away from the film having seen it the first time, and I too gave it 3.5. I was watching it going, "This is a 3-star movie," for all the reasons that we've been talking about. And that end just hits you so hard. I gave it 3.5. Having gone back and watched it again, in quick succession with the remake and just really with the original, and really kind of just sort of getting into the story and its themes and characters and ideas and its themes of determinism and the idea of your fate is predestined or is it, and all the rest of it. I appreciated what it was even more.
Okay.
And to the fact that I actually nudged it up another half star.
Okay, so you're at 4.
So I got to 4 by the end of the second viewing. I was just like, you know what? It isn't everything, but what it is, it does really well.
Okay, good. I wouldn't argue with that. It's a solid movie, and go see it. Nightmare
Absolutely.
Alley, Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, and the four Oscar nominations that it got, you can't argue with those at all. No. Picture, production design, cinematography, and costumes. It's like,
I'm surprised there was I was surprised there was no acting noms at all in there, considering the star-studded cast. But there you have it.
Yeah, I think the one that was closest, I think, was Cate Blanchett. Mm-hmm. I'd seen her named in some of the other listings. But then it's been a weird year for Oscar nominations.
Absolutely, it certainly has, and we're going to be talking a lot more Oscars in the coming weeks, I'm sure.
I'm afraid so. Yes, we are.
Anyhow, till next week, James.
Goodbye.
Cheers, everybody.